There are so many aspects and so many ways to look at what so many of us have been through here. One of the things that very often goes unspoken are those behind the scenes, those that we don't often speak of, and that we very often, unfortunately, do not necessarily remember. We often overlook the cameramen and camerawomen who report on these moments and preserve them for us. These men and women give us the images that allow us to forever remember the heroic deeds of those that we are here to honor tonight. One perfect example of that, one man who fits that bill perfectly, was cameraman Glen Pettit. Glen was a cameraman, photojournalist for Channel 12 News, who went on to become a New York City police officer and was at the World Trade Center on September 11th, filming the events for the New York City Police Department. Glen did not return, as did so many. To say a few words on behalf of Glen's family and his News 12 work and family is former News 12 anchor Trish Bergin.
To all of the 9/11 families and the first responders, we are very pleased to be here today, myself and my fellow former News 12 colleagues. We are very honored to be a part of this special 10th anniversary memorial. We also hold the memory of a loved one, a colleague, stolen away all too soon. I find it incredible that your loss and our loss and this profound grief is still so heavy 10 years later. In those long days and those sleepless nights following September 11th, we know that you searched through the newspapers and you consumed every television report that we were able to offer to you, just searching for that glimmer of hope that your loved one would be the one who we would be able to report to you was the one who was rescued from the rubble. And every time that your phone rang, we know that you were hoping that it would be him or her on the other end to tell you that they were safe. You showed us photos and asked us to help you find your loved ones. And with clenched hands, in sweating palms, live on the news desk, we had a sinking feeling of desperation and the knowledge that time was slipping by and we couldn't deliver what you had so hoped for. We wanted to deliver to you those images of survivors, your loved ones. We wanted to show you them embracing their children, husbands and wives. Yes, we had hoped to give you all of this. And all the while, we in the newsroom were holding on to our own weary hopes that our colleague Glen Pettit would also be found alive. And during breaks in our news coverage, we would pray to ourselves that Glen would come bursting through the doors of the newsroom with his bright blue eyes, his beautiful smile, his wit, and that endless bound of energy. He never arrived. And we know at that very same time, you were fighting back tears. Many of you struggling to conjure up the strength to explain to a child who couldn't understand what was happening in our world. 10 years have pushed forward with life, and sometimes stopping and sharing the stories of loved ones so the next generation can see the pictures and hear the stories about someone so special, and that knowing them and loving them and losing them is still so profound. But never to have known them at all would be a gift lost altogether. Well, Glen Pettit was a gift for years to all of us at News 12. His former colleague, Lee Tyrell, remembers Glen every day. His photo is still on the door in her office, adorned with a red, white, and blue ribbon. And News 12 reporter Andrew Anger survived many rides in the passenger seat of the news van with Glen Pettit behind the wheel because he was a lunatic of a driver, but they were always the first ones on the scene. And Danielle Campbell remembers Glen as someone who lived life fast. His sense of humor was wicked and his heart was huge. Glen wanted to make a difference, saving lives, even as he ran toward those towers. Doug Eade recalls Glen's passion for news and a remarkable gift for being able to tell a story through pictures. He wanted every viewer to have a front row seat like he did to some of the most compelling news events of our time. Producer Debbie Gade remembers Glen's overwhelming excitement to join the NYPD Academy, that when he got the call, he literally dropped everything in the middle of an NTSB news conference in Maryland to jump on the next flight back to the Big Apple. He even went as far as to throw reporter Judy Martin over his shoulder to spare her cold feet in the middle of a snowstorm coverage. And there was a teacher in Glen who loved to impart his skills to other photojournalists, like his good buddy Paul Janex. Reporter Sherry Einhorn remembers Glen's love of movie trivia, his tremendous sense of humor, and a decade later still makes her smile on even the worst of days. Glen was the type of person who everybody wanted to be around because he wanted to hear about you. And those are the memories of another colleague. My favorite, and finally, the final story. Glen and I met in 7th grade. We went to junior high together in high school. We worked our summer jobs together at the local community pool. We then selected the same college and went on to work together at News 12. I have plenty of fabulous memories of Glen, but the one that stands out the most is when we worked together covering the tragic crash of TWA Flight 800. We had been there day and night with so many of you in blue. We had $20 left in our pocket. Glen said he was going to run out to get a couple of sandwiches for the news crew. He came back with no food. He came back with cases of water for the volunteer firefighters and the police officers who had worked tirelessly to recover the remains of those who perished in that plane crash. This is who Glen was. We didn't eat that day. Glen thought it was the least that we could do, and he was right. These are our stories. Continue to share your stories, your gift, because then our gifts will live on in our hearts and in our minds and in the hearts and minds of our children. Thank you.
Glen and his family are indeed fortunate that he has such wonderful friends who remember him so dearly and think and care about him each day, as we all do for those that we all have lost.